Hey family. Welcome to Mr. Gray Family, where every story begins with us. She was screaming in pain, but the real shock hadn't even begun yet. The kind of pain that doesn't wait for permission. The kind that takes over your body, your breath, your thoughts, until nothing else exists. Imani gripped the edge of the hospital bed, her fingers tightening with every wave that hit her. Her breathing came in sharp bursts, uneven, controlled only by sheer will. Just breathe. Just breathe, a nurse said beside her, calm but firm. But breathing wasn't the problem. Holding it together was. Because this wasn't just about the pain. This was about doing something she had prepared for. Alone. No hand to hold. No familiar voice telling her it would be okay. No partner standing beside her through it all. Just her, and the life she was about to bring into the world. Another contraction hit harder this time. Imani clenched her jaw, her eyes shutting tightly as her body tensed. Okay, she whispered under her breath, forcing herself to stay focused. You've got this. You've got this. But even as she said it, something inside her felt different. Not fear. Not exactly. Something else. Something she couldn't quite explain yet. The room moved around her in controlled urgency. Nurses adjusted equipment. Monitors beeped steadily. Footsteps passed in and out. Everything was happening fast. Too fast. Where's the doctor? One of the nurses asked. He's on his way, another replied. Imani barely registered the exchange. Her world had narrowed down to one thing. Push through this. Push through everything. Another wave came. Stronger. Deeper. She let out a strained breath, her voice shaking slightly this time. Okay. This is really happening. But what she didn't know was that the moment about to walk into that room would change everything she thought she understood about moving on. Have you ever tried to move on? Only for life to drag you right back to the one person you were trying to forget, not just in memory, not just in passing thoughts, but right in front of you, at the exact moment you thought you had finally let them go. Because what happens when the man who broke your heart becomes the one responsible for delivering your baby? And what if he doesn't even know the child is his? Welcome to Mr. Gray Family, a storytelling universe built for people who crave meaning, emotion, and unforgettable narratives. Here, every story begins with a spark and ends with a feeling you'll carry long after the video ends. Love, betrayal, family, secrets, lessons. It's all here, wrapped in immersive narration that makes you forget everything else. If you're searching for stories that pull your heart, challenge your mind, and keep you coming back, subscribe now. Your story begins the moment you choose to stay. Before we go any further, I need you to do something real quick. If you believe moments like this don't happen by accident, go ahead and like this video. And I want you to be honest in the comments. Would you tell him, or would you keep the truth to yourself, even if it changed everything? And if you're new here, subscribe, because stories like this, they don't come around often. Back in that hospital room, the door opened, and everything changed. A doctor stepped in, calm, focused, professional, the kind of presence that usually brings reassurance in moments like this. But not this time, not for her. Imani's eyes lifted, just for a second, just long enough to see his face. And in that single moment, her entire world stopped. Her breath caught in her chest, not from the pain, but from recognition, because standing there, looking right at her, was Nathaniel. Not a memory, not a name she avoided saying, not a chapter she had closed, but him, real, right there, wearing a white coat like nothing between them had ever happened. For a second, neither of them spoke. The room didn't stop. The nurses didn't notice. The machines kept their steady rhythm. But between them, everything froze. Nathaniel's expression shifted, just slightly, controlled, but not enough to hide it completely. Imani. Her name left his mouth carefully, like it still meant something, like it never stopped meaning something. Another contraction hit, hard. Imani gripped the bed again, her body tightening as she forced herself to stay grounded. Of all the hospitals, of all the doctors, of all the nights this could have happened, it had to be him. She let out a breath that almost turned into a quiet, disbelieving laugh. This, she muttered, shaking her head slightly, this can't be real. Nathaniel stepped closer, his training taking over automatically. I'm here, he said, his voice steady. You're okay. We're going to get through this. But there was something in his eyes. Something unspoken. Something unfinished. And Imani saw it. Even through the pain. Even through everything happening around her. She saw it. Another wave came, pulling her focus back. Then stop standing there, she said through clenched teeth, her tone sharp but not cruel. And do your job. One of the nurses glanced between them, confused by the tension she couldn't quite explain. Nathaniel didn't react. Not outwardly. He moved into position, focused, precise, controlled. But inside, nothing about this was controlled, because something didn't feel right. Something wasn't adding up. His eyes shifted briefly, to her chart, then back to her. Then again, a quiet pause, a subtle realization beginning to form. Imani, he said again, slower this time. She already knew. She had imagined this moment before. Just never like this, never here, never now. Yes, she said. No build-up, no hesitation, just truth waiting at the edge of being fully spoken. Nathaniel's chest tightened. His mind started connecting pieces faster than he could process them. He stopped, then tried again. You're pregnant. Imani raised an eyebrow slightly, even through the intensity of the moment. Glad we cleared that up. A nurse let out a small, surprised laugh before catching herself. But Nathaniel didn't smile. Not this time. Because now, the real question was right there. Waiting. Heavy. Unavoidable. How far along? He asked quietly. Imani held his gaze. Full term. That was all it took. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was deep. Nathaniel did the math, and in that instant, everything changed. His voice dropped. This is my child, isn't it? And just like that, the night stopped being about labor and became something much bigger. Washington, D.C. didn't ask for permission to feel important. It just was. From the early morning rush of professionals moving with purpose, to the late-night glow of neighborhoods filled with music, laughter, and stories being lived in real time, this city carried a rhythm that didn't slow down for anyone. And Imani, she had learned how to move with it, not against it, not chasing it, but within it. Her apartment sat in a lively part of the city, nothing overly extravagant, but carefully put together in a way that reflected her. Warm lighting, clean spaces, small details that showed intention. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about peace. Saturday mornings usually started the same way. Soft music playing in the background. Something smooth, familiar. The kind of sound that didn't demand attention but filled the room just enough. Imani stood in her kitchen, coffee in hand, scrolling through her phone briefly before setting it down. No emails, no emergencies. I'll take that, she murmured to herself. A rare moment, and she knew better than to take it for granted. Her phone buzzed almost on cue. She glanced at it, already knowing who it would be. Of course, she said, under her breath, picking up. Please tell me you're not still in the house. A voice came through immediately. Imani smirked. Good morning to you too. You said we were meeting at 11. It is now. A pause. 10:45. Relax. I'm getting ready. You've been getting ready since yesterday. The voice shot back. Imani shook her head, smiling slightly as she walked toward her bedroom. I'm on my way. Try not to stress yourself out before brunch. Too late for that. The call ended. Imani set her phone down and took a moment, just a moment, to look at herself in the mirror. Not to fix anything, not to adjust anything, just to pause. Because life had a way of moving quickly, and she had learned to catch small moments when she could. Brunch wasn't just brunch. It never was. It was conversation, energy, connection, the kind that didn't require explanation. Imani slid into her seat as two women were already deep into a conversation. You're late, one of them said immediately, raising an eyebrow. I'm on time, Imani replied calmly. You're just early. That's not how time works, the other one added. It is when you look like this, Imani said, gesturing casually to herself. That earned a laugh. Okay, I'll give you that, one of them said. But next time, try not to make us age waiting for you. No promises. Menus were barely touched before the conversation picked up again. Work stories, random observations, light teasing that came naturally between people who didn't have to force connection. You still haven't answered my question, one of them said, leaning forward slightly. Are you dating anyone? Imani didn't even hesitate. No, that was too quick. Because it's a simple answer. Simple doesn't always mean honest. Imani picked up her drink, taking a small sip before responding. It is honest, she said calmly. I'm just not interested right now. Not interested. Or not ready. Imani glanced at her briefly. A small pause. Not long enough for anyone else to notice. But enough. I said what I said, she replied. Her tone wasn't defensive, but it wasn't open either. And her friends noticed. They always did. One of them leaned back slightly, studying her. You've been like this for a while now, she said. Focused, busy, mysterious. Mysterious? Imani raised an eyebrow. Yes. Like there's a whole part of your life you're not letting us into. Imani let out a quiet breath, shaking her head. Or maybe, she said, setting her glass down, there's just nothing to let you into. That answer sat there for a second. Not heavy, but not light either. Because the truth was, Imani's life looked full. It sounded full. It moved like it was full. But there were moments, small ones, quiet ones, where everything slowed down just enough for her to feel what she didn't talk about. Later that evening, back in her apartment, the silence felt different. Not uncomfortable, but noticeable. She set her bag down, slipping off her shoes as she walked further inside. The music wasn't on this time. The TV wasn't playing in the background. Just stillness. Imani moved through her space effortlessly. Habit, routine, familiarity. But when she reached the window, she paused. The city stretched out in front of her, alive in its own way. Lights flickering across buildings. Cars moving steadily through the streets. People somewhere out there, living their own stories. And for a moment, she just stood there, watching, thinking. Not about work, not about plans, but about something she didn't name. Something she didn't need to, because even without saying it, she felt it. A quiet space in her life that no amount of routine had filled. Not yet. And maybe she wasn't ready for it to be filled. Or maybe she just didn't know how. The first time Imani saw Nathaniel, she almost didn't notice him. And that wasn't because he didn't stand out. It was because she wasn't looking. The charity health event was already in motion by the time she arrived. Organized, structured, and filled with the kind of people who spoke with confidence, even when they weren't saying much. Imani adjusted the folder in her hand as she moved through the space, focused on her responsibilities. Table 3 needs updated forms, someone called out. I've got it, she responded quickly, already heading in that direction. This wasn't her first event. She knew how these things worked. Keep things moving. Stay efficient. Don't get pulled into conversations that had nothing to do with the job. Simple, at least. That was the plan. Excuse me. The voice came from behind her. Calm, measured. Imani turned slightly, not fully, just enough to acknowledge. Yes? Nathaniel stood there, composed, one hand loosely holding a document. Up close, there was something different about him. Not loud, not attention-seeking. Just certain. I think this belongs to you, he said, holding the paper out. Imani glanced at it, then back at him. It does, she said, reaching for it. Thank you. Their fingers brushed briefly. Unintentional, but noticeable. First time at one of these? She asked, already turning slightly to continue moving. Nathaniel shook his head. No. Just the first time I've lost something this quickly. Imani let out a small laugh despite herself. That's usually how it goes. The more important it looks, the faster it disappears. I'll keep that in mind, he replied. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just there. Imani shifted her weight slightly. Well, try not to lose anything else. We're trying to keep this organized. I'll do my best, he said. Something about the way he said it made her glance back at him again. Briefly. Then she walked off, but not without noticing. Later that evening, the event had shifted into something less formal. Conversations were looser. Laughter came easier. The structured tone had softened. Imani stood near one of the side tables, finally taking a moment for herself. You look like you've been working all day, a familiar voice said. She turned. Nathaniel. Again. I have, she replied simply. And now I'm deciding if I want to stay or leave before someone asks me to do something else. Nathaniel smiled slightly. That sounds like a smart plan. What about you? She asked. You don't look like someone who gets assigned extra work. I don't, he admitted. But I also don't leave early. Why not? He shrugged lightly. Because sometimes the most interesting conversations happen after everything is supposed to be over. Imani raised an eyebrow. And have you had any of those tonight? Nathaniel held her gaze. I think I'm about to. That caught her off guard. Not because it was bold, but because it wasn't forced. She crossed her arms slightly, tilting her head. You always this confident? Only when I'm sure, he replied. And you're sure about what exactly? That you were about to leave, and I'd regret not saying something first. Imani studied him for a second, then shook her head, a small smile forming. That's a smooth answer. It's an honest one. Those don't always go together. They should. That made her pause, just for a second, because there was something in that statement that felt real, not rehearsed, not performative, just direct. So what would you have said? She asked. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. That I'd like to take you to dinner. Imani blinked once, then let out a quiet laugh. You don't waste time. I don't see the point in it. And what if I said no? Then I'd respect it, he said. But I'd probably ask again another day. That made her laugh again, this time a little more freely. You're persistent. I prefer consistent. Imani shook her head slightly, looking away for a brief moment before looking back at him. You don't even know me. I know enough to be interested, he replied. And what exactly do you think you know? Nathaniel thought for a second. You're focused, you don't entertain distractions, and you're the only person here who hasn't tried to impress anyone. Imani narrowed her eyes slightly. Or maybe I just didn't have time. That too, he admitted. But it still says something. Another pause. But this one felt different. Lighter. More open. Dinner, she repeated, considering it. Nathaniel waited. Not pushing, not filling the silence. Just letting her decide. Imani finally nodded once. One dinner, she said. That's it. Nathaniel smiled. That's all I'm asking for. Don't make me regret it. I won't. She gave him a look. You sound very sure of yourself. I am, he said. But I guess we'll find out. Imani shook her head, but the smile didn't leave. All right, she said. We'll see. And just like that, something started. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that felt different. Some relationships build slowly, carefully, step by step. Imani and Nathaniel didn't. They moved with a kind of certainty that made hesitation feel unnecessary. What started as one dinner turned into another, then late-night conversations that stretched longer than either of them planned, then routines, calls that didn't feel like obligations, silences that didn't feel empty. Time passed, but it didn't feel like it, because everything between them felt aligned. I don't usually do this, Imani said one evening, leaning back slightly as she looked at him. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Do what? Move this fast. He nodded once. Neither do I. She studied him. You're not even a little concerned. About what? That this might not work? Nathaniel didn't rush his answer. Instead, he asked, do you feel like it won't? Imani paused. Because that was the problem. No, she admitted. Then why question it? He asked. She exhaled quietly, shaking her head. Because things that feel this easy don't usually stay that way. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly. Or maybe they do, he said. If both people decide not to complicate them. Imani held his gaze. And for once, she didn't argue. The wedding reflected everything people expected from Nathaniel's world. Elegant, polished, carefully curated down to the smallest detail. But none of that mattered to Imani. Not the setting, not the attention, not the expectations surrounding it. Because when she stood there, looking at him, everything else faded. Nathaniel didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look around the room. He looked at her, like she was the only thing that existed in that moment. You sure about this? Imani whispered just before the ceremony began, a hint of teasing in her voice. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. I've never been more sure about anything. She smiled. Good answer. I don't give bad ones. he replied quietly. And just like that, they stepped into something bigger than both of them. Marriage didn't change them overnight. At first, it felt like an extension of what they already had. Comfort, connection, understanding. Their home became a space that held both of their worlds. Imani's warmth, Nathaniel's structure. It worked. For a while. Nathaniel's career began to rise. Not gradually, not quietly, but noticeably. Longer hours, more responsibility, more people depending on him. Imani saw it before he said anything. "You're doing that thing again," she said one evening, watching him scroll through something on his phone. Nathaniel glanced up briefly. "What thing?" "Being here, but not really here." "I'm right here," he replied. "Physically, yes, but that wasn't what she meant." "You know what I mean," she said calmly. Nathaniel exhaled, setting his phone down. "It's just work. Things are picking up. I understand that," she said. "But I need you to understand something too." He looked at her now, fully. "When you stop showing up," she continued, "I feel it." Nathaniel leaned back slightly. "I'm doing this for us," he said. "For our future." Imani nodded slowly. "I didn't ask for more," she replied. "I asked for you." That landed, but not deeply enough. Not yet. The changes didn't happen all at once. That's what made them harder to notice. Dinner plans that got pushed back, conversations that became shorter, moments that used to matter, becoming easier to overlook. And then, the silence, not peaceful, not comfortable, just there, filling spaces that used to feel different. "You've been quiet," Nathaniel said one night, walking into the living room. Imani didn't look up immediately. "Have the first?" She replied, "Yes." She finally looked at him. "Or maybe," she said, "I've just stopped repeating myself." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means I've said what I needed to say already, and I've told you I'm handling things," he responded. "That's the problem," she said. "What is?" "You're handling everything, except us." That time, it hit, because there was no way to ignore it. The night everything ended wasn't loud. There was no shouting, no dramatic exit, just truth. Imani stood in the middle of their living room, her expression steady, but her eyes said everything she wasn't raising her voice to express. "You're here," she said slowly. Nathaniel looked at her, confused. "Yeah, I'm here." She shook her head. "No, you're not." A pause, the kind that forces you to listen. "Imani, you stopped showing up a long time ago," she continued. "You just didn't notice." Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm building something for us, and I'm losing something because of it," she cut in. That stopped him, because there it was, clear, direct, unavoidable. Neither of them moved for a moment, because sometimes the hardest part isn't the argument, it's the realization. Imani's voice softened, but it didn't weaken. "I don't feel like I'm in this with you anymore." Nathaniel didn't respond right away, because he didn't have one, not a real one. And just like that, without shouting, without chaos, without anything breaking except what couldn't be seen, their marriage ended. Before we move on, I want to ask you something. Have you ever loved someone who slowly became a stranger right in front of you? Life didn't stop after the divorce. That was the first thing Imani noticed. There was no dramatic shift in the world around her, no moment where everything slowed down to acknowledge what had ended. The city still moved the same way. Cars filled the streets. People rushed to work. Conversations carried on like nothing had changed. And in a way, nothing had, except her. The apartment she moved into wasn't far from where she used to live. But it felt different, not because of the space, but because of what it didn't hold. No shared routines, no second voice in the room, no presence that required adjustment. Everything in this space belonged to her. Every decision, every detail, every moment. And for the first time in a long time, there was no one to consider but herself. Imani set her keys down on the kitchen counter, kicking off her shoes as she stepped further inside. It had been a long day, not overwhelming, not exhausting, just full. The kind of day that kept your mind busy enough to avoid thinking too much. She moved through her apartment with ease, picking up where she left off that morning. Bag down, hair tied back, jacket off, Routine, controlled, intentional. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, already expecting the energy before answering. "You better not be canceling tonight." Imani smirked slightly. "Why does everyone assume I'm the problem?" "Because you are," the voice replied quickly. "Now answer the question." "I'm not canceling." "Good. Because I already ordered food." "That doesn't even make sense." "It makes perfect sense. You'll understand when you get here." Imani shook her head. "I'll be there. Don't be late." "No promises." The call ended. Later that evening, the energy was completely different. Laughter filled the room before Imani even sat down. "You made it," one voice called out. "Barely," another added. "We were about to replace you." "With who?" Imani asked, taking her seat. "Someone reliable." "Then you definitely don't know me," she replied. That earned a round of laughter. The conversations moved quickly, stories overlapping, opinions flying freely, the kind of environment where nobody had to filter themselves. "You've been quiet lately," one of them said, leaning forward slightly. "Not like before." Imani picked up her drink, taking a small sip. "I've been working." "That's not what I meant." "I know," she replied calmly. A pause. Not uncomfortable, just aware. "Are you okay?" another voice asked. Imani nodded. "I'm good." It wasn't defensive. It wasn't forced. It was simply controlled. "Have you talked to him?" someone asked carefully. Imani didn't even look up. "No." "Not even once?" "No." "Do you want to?" That question stayed in the air for a moment, long enough to matter, but not long enough to change her answer. "No," she said again. And this time, it was firmer. The conversation shifted after that. Lighter topics, easier laughter. But something had already been said without needing to be repeated. Later that night, back in her apartment, the energy shifted again. Quiet. Still, just her. Imani set her phone down on the counter and leaned against it slightly, letting out a slow breath. Not tired, not overwhelmed, just aware. Because during the day, during conversations, during everything that kept her moving, it was easy to stay focused, easy to stay present, easy to not think about what used to be. But moments like this, when everything slowed down just enough, that's when it showed up. Not loudly, not all at once, just small reminders. A memory tied to a routine, a thought that didn't need permission, a question she didn't ask out loud. Imani pushed off the counter, walking toward the window. The city stretched out in front of her again. Familiar, consistent, unchanged. She crossed her arms slightly, her expression calm, but her mind moving quietly beneath it. Because independence felt good. It did. There was strength in it, clarity in it, peace in knowing she didn't have to rely on anyone else to feel stable. But strength didn't erase everything. It didn't rewrite what had happened. It didn't completely silence the part of her that remembered what it felt like to not do life alone. Imani exhaled slowly, then straightened, not pushing the feeling away, just not letting it stay too long, because she had already made a decision, and she wasn't the kind of person who moved backward once she made one. So she turned away from the window, back into her space, back into herself, and kept going. It started as something small, so small, Imani almost ignored it. A slight shift in her body, a kind of fatigue that didn't match her routine. At first, she blamed work, long hours, back-to-back responsibilities, the kind of schedule that didn't leave much room for rest. "Yeah, that's all it is," she muttered one morning, pressing her fingers lightly against her temple as she stood in her bathroom. But something about it didn't feel right. Not wrong, just different. A few days passed. The feeling didn't go away. If anything, it became harder to dismiss. Imani stood in her kitchen, staring at her coffee like it had personally offended her. She hadn't taken a sip, not because she didn't want it, but because suddenly, she didn't. "That's new," she said quietly. She picked up the mug anyway, brought it close, then paused. A small frown crossed her face. Then she set it back down, untouched. Later that day, the thought came again. Stronger this time, clearer, and harder to ignore. Imani sat at the edge of her bed, her phone in her hand, but she wasn't scrolling. She wasn't doing anything. Just sitting there, thinking. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. No, that doesn't make sense. But her body didn't argue, and neither did her instincts. The pharmacy trip was quick, in and out. No hesitation, no overthinking, just action. Because once the thought took root, she wasn't the kind of person to avoid the answer. Back in her apartment, the silence felt heavier, not overwhelming, but focused, like everything was waiting. Imani stood in her bathroom again, holding the small box in her hand. She looked at it for a second, then exhaled. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's just be clear." Minutes later, she stared at the result, not blinking, not moving, just processing. "Okay." The word came out slowly, not panicked, not loud, just controlled. But her mind wasn't still. It was moving. Fast, too fast. Pregnant. Imani sat down on the closed toilet seat, her hand resting lightly against her stomach without thinking. This is real," she said under her breath. Not a question, a realization. Her first instinct wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It was clarity, a sharp awareness that everything in her life had just shifted again. Then came the questions, not emotional, not dramatic, just real. What now? How does this change things? What does this mean for her future? And then, the one question she couldn't avoid. Nathaniel. Imani leaned back slightly, exhaling through her nose. "No," she said quickly. "Don't go there." But the thought didn't leave. Because it couldn't. She stood up, pacing slowly across the room. "This is mine," she said, more firmly now. "This is my responsibility." Her voice wasn't shaking. It wasn't uncertain, but it wasn't completely settled either. Her phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the moment. She picked it up without thinking. "You sound like you're about to make a decision you're not telling me about," the voice said immediately. Imani paused, then let out a quiet breath. You ever have one of those moments where everything just changes? A pause on the other end. "That depends," the voice replied carefully. "Is this a good change or a complicated one?" Imani looked down again, her hand resting lightly where her mind hadn't fully caught up yet. "Both," she said. "What happened?" the voice asked. Imani hesitated. Not long. Just enough to choose honesty. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Not shock. Just processing. "Okay," the voice said slowly. "All right. We can work with that." Imani almost smiled. "We?" she asked. "Yes, we," the voice replied. "You're not doing this alone." That landed. Soft, but steady. "Have you told him?" the voice asked next. And there it was. The question she already knew was coming. Imani didn't answer right away, because the answer wasn't complicated. But the decision behind it was. "No," she said finally. "Are you going to?" Imani walked back toward the window, her eyes settling on the city again. Same view. Different reality. She thought about everything. The marriage. The distance. The silence. The way things ended. Not messy. Not chaotic. But final. "He has his life," she said quietly. "And I have mine. That doesn't change what this is," the voice replied. "I know," Imani said. "But it changes what I need." A pause. "What do you need?" the voice asked. Imani didn't hesitate this time. "Peace. Are you sure this won't come back later?" the voice asked carefully. Imani exhaled slowly. "It might," she admitted. "But right now?" She placed her hand against her stomach again. Grounded. Certain. "I'm choosing what I can live with." Fear was there. Of course it was. But it didn't control her. It didn't make the decision for her. Because strength wasn't about ignoring fear. It was about knowing it existed and moving forward anyway. Imani nodded to herself once. Decision made. Not rushed. Not emotional. But intentional. "I'm not telling him," she said quietly. And this time, there was no hesitation. Nathaniel didn't fall apart after the divorce. That would have been easier to understand, easier to explain. Instead, he became sharper, more focused, more disciplined than he had ever been before. His schedule filled up almost immediately. Longer hours at the hospital, more complex cases, more responsibility placed on his name. And he handled it all without hesitation, without complaint, without pause. "You've been taking on more than usual," a colleague said one afternoon, glancing over a file. Nathaniel didn't look up. "It needs to be done." "That's not what I meant." Nathaniel finally lifted his eyes. "Then what did you mean?" The colleague studied him for a moment. "You don't slow down anymore." Nathaniel closed the file in front of him. "I don't need to." That answer ended the conversation, but it didn't change the truth, because slowing down meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant facing something he hadn't quite figured out how to deal with. So he stayed moving. Months passed, and his name started carrying weight in rooms it hadn't before. Decisions were deferred to him. Opinions mattered more. Opportunities expanded. He wasn't just a doctor anymore. He was becoming a presence, a figure people trusted, respected, followed. "Congratulations," someone said during a formal gathering, raising a glass slightly. "Not everyone reaches this level this quickly." Nathaniel nodded once. "Thank you. You've built something impressive." That word again. Built. Nathaniel glanced around the room briefly. Conversations happening. Laughter. Connections being made. Everything looked exactly how success was supposed to look. But it didn't feel the way he expected it to. "Enjoy it," the same voice added. "Moments like this don't come often." Nathaniel gave a small, polite smile. "I will," but he already knew that wasn't true, because even in that moment, surrounded by recognition, by progress, by everything he had worked toward, there was something missing. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else could see, but enough for him to notice. Later that night, his home was quiet. Not peaceful, just still. Nathaniel loosened his tie as he walked in, setting his keys down with the same precision he applied to everything else. Routine, controlled, predictable. He moved through the space without turning anything on. No music, no television, no distractions, just silence. Nathaniel walked toward the window, looking out over the city. Lights stretched across the skyline. Movement below, life continuing in every direction. He stood there for a while, longer than he usually allowed himself to, because there was no one waiting for him, no voice in the next room, no conversation to step into, just space. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, his expression unchanged, but his thoughts shifting. He had everything he once worked toward: position, recognition, influence, and more opportunities ahead than he could count. But there was something about the quiet that didn't sit right. Not uncomfortable, not overwhelming, just noticeable. His mind moved back, briefly, not intentionally, just naturally. A conversation, a tone, a moment he didn't pay enough attention to at the time. "You're here, but you're not here." Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. At the time, he thought he understood what she meant. But now, he wasn't so sure, because from where he stood, he had been doing everything right. Providing, building, securing a future. But something about that didn't feel complete anymore. Not wrong, just incomplete. Nathaniel pushed the thought aside, straightening slightly, because that's what he did. He adjusted. He moved forward. He focused on what was in front of him. And what was in front of him was success. Years continued to shape him. His influence expanded beyond the hospital. Investments, partnerships, decisions that carried financial weight, until one day, the title followed him into every room he entered. Billionaire. It didn't change how he spoke. It didn't change how he moved, but it changed how people saw him. Doors opened faster. Conversations shifted. Expectations grew. "You've reached a level most people only talk about," someone said during another meeting. Nathaniel nodded once. "I understand. Do you?" the person asked, slightly amused. Nathaniel didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, he understood what it meant, but not what it felt like. That night, the silence returned again. Same space, same view, same stillness. Nathaniel stood there once more, looking out, thinking, just a little longer this time. Because for all the progress he had made, for everything he had built, there was one thing he never replaced. Not fully, and even though he didn't say it out loud, he knew exactly what it was. Before we go further, I want you to be honest. Do you think success is worth losing the person you love? Let me know in the comments. And if this story is pulling you in, make sure you like and subscribe, because it only gets deeper from here. The night didn't announce itself as important. There was no warning, no sign that anything was about to change. Imani was already home when it started. Shoes off, hair tied back, the kind of quiet evening she had grown used to. Her phone rested on the table. A soft hum of music played in the background. Nothing demanding attention. Nothing urgent. Just another night. Then it hit. Not sharp. Not sudden. Just a tight pull low in her body that made her pause mid-step. Imani frowned slightly, her hand instinctively resting against her side. "Okay," she said under her breath. She stood still for a moment, waiting, listening to her body. It passed. She exhaled lightly and shook her head. Probably nothing. And just like that, she moved on. Back to what she was doing. Back to routine. Minutes later, it came again. Stronger. Longer. This time, she didn't ignore it. Her hand pressed more firmly against her stomach as she leaned slightly against the counter. "All right," she said, her voice quieter now. "That's not nothing." She checked the time, then waited, not panicking, not rushing, just paying attention. Another wave followed, closer this time. Imani closed her eyes briefly, focusing on her breathing. In, out, slow, controlled. Her mind didn't race. It calculated, measured, observed. "This might be it," she said softly. Not fear, recognition. She pushed herself upright and moved with purpose now. Bag, phone, keys, everything she had prepared weeks ago, just in case. Now it wasn't just in case. Now it was happening. Another contraction hit. Stronger. It bent her slightly forward this time. Her grip tightened on the edge of the counter. Okay. She exhaled slowly, still controlled, still steady. But the space around her felt different now. The quiet wasn't relaxing anymore. It was focused. Imani reached for her phone, paused, then lowered it again. No calls, no hesitation, no second guessing. This was something she had already decided. She picked up her bag instead, slipped her shoes on quickly, her movements efficient, deliberate. Another wave came, sharp enough to stop her mid-step. She leaned against the wall this time, her breathing tightening slightly. "All right," she said, more firmly now. "Let's not do this slowly." Her reflection caught her eye briefly as she passed the mirror. Not panic, not fear, just intensity. And something else, strength. Because no matter how this night unfolded, she was ready for it. Imani opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The building was quiet, unaware. Each step forward required more focus now, more control, more awareness of what her body was doing. By the time she reached her car, the contractions had a pattern. Not random anymore, not uncertain, real. She sat behind the wheel for a second, gripping it lightly, not moving yet, just breathing. In, out, in, out. "This is happening," she said quietly, not to convince herself, but to acknowledge it. Another contraction hit, stronger than the last. Her grip tightened. Her head dropped slightly forward, and for the first time, a flicker of something else appeared. Not doubt, not regret, fear, not of the pain, not of the moment, but of doing this, alone. It passed quickly, because it had to. Imani lifted her head again. Her breathing steadied. Her focus returned. "Not tonight," she said firmly. She started the car. The engine came to life. The city stretched ahead of her, lights guiding the way. Each minute forward brought the contractions closer, stronger, more demanding. Her hands stayed steady on the wheel. Her eyes locked on the road. This wasn't about what she didn't have. This wasn't about what had ended. This was about what was beginning. Another wave hit. She exhaled through it, focused, present. And as she drove through the night, one thing became clear. There was no turning back. Not now. Not anymore. By the time Imani pulled into the hospital entrance, the contractions were no longer something she could measure calmly. They demanded attention, immediate, unavoidable. She parked faster than she normally would, but not recklessly, still controlled, still aware. The moment she stepped out of the car, another contraction hit, stronger. It forced her to pause, One hand gripping the door, she steadied herself. Her breath tightened. Okay. She exhaled, pushing through it. The automatic doors opened as she approached, and the shift in energy was instant. Inside, everything moved with purpose. Footsteps crossing quickly, voices exchanging information without hesitation, phones ringing somewhere in the distance. Imani stepped forward, her pace uneven now, not from uncertainty, but from the rhythm her body had taken over. A nurse at the front desk looked up immediately. "How far along are you?" she asked, already moving around the counter. "Full term," Imani answered, her voice steady despite the pressure building again. "Are you alone?" "Yes." No hesitation, no explanation, just fact. "All right, come with me," the nurse said, placing a guiding hand lightly near her arm, not pulling, just directing. They moved quickly, through hallways that felt longer than they should, past rooms filled with quiet conversations and controlled urgency. Another contraction hit mid-step. Imani stopped. This time she bent slightly forward, her grip tightening on the edge of a nearby counter. Her breathing shifted. Shorter, sharper. "Breathe through it," the nurse instructed. "I am," Imani replied through clenched teeth. It passed, barely. "Let's keep moving," the nurse said. They reached a room quickly after that. The door opened. Bright lights. Prepared space. "Up here," the nurse said, guiding her toward the bed. Imani sat down first, then shifted carefully, adjusting as another wave built beneath the surface. "How long have the contractions been consistent?" the nurse asked, already checking equipment. "Not long," Imani replied, "but they're getting closer." "All right, we're going to move quickly." The room filled with motion. Gloves. Monitors. Voices that stayed calm even as everything sped up. Imani leaned back slightly, her hands gripping the sides of the bed. Her breathing stayed controlled, but it required effort now. More effort. Another nurse stepped in. "We're getting the doctor," she said. Imani nodded once. Her eyes moved around the room briefly, taking everything in, not because she needed to, but because it gave her something to focus on between contractions. Machines began their steady rhythm, a soft, consistent sound that marked time in a way her body no longer did. "All right," the nurse said, checking her again. "You're progressing faster than expected." Imani let out a short breath. "That's good, right? It means we don't have time to waste." Another contraction hit, harder than the last. Her body tensed instantly. Her grip tightened. Her breathing shifted again, deeper this time, forced through the intensity. "Stay with it," the nurse encouraged. "I am," Imani replied, her voice lower now, more focused. The room didn't slow down. If anything, it became more precise. Everything had a role. Everything had a purpose. "Doctor's on the way," someone said from near the door. Imani closed her eyes briefly, not to escape, but to center herself. This was the moment she had prepared for. Every appointment, every decision, every quiet night where she chose to keep moving forward on her own. All of it led here. Another contraction rose. She met it head on, breathing through it, holding steady. Her mind stayed clear, not drifting, not overwhelmed. Focused. "Almost there," the nurse said. Imani nodded once, her jaw tight, her body responding without hesitation now. The room shifted again, more movement near the door, footsteps approaching, a subtle change in energy, not louder, but different. "All right," one of the nurses said, adjusting slightly. "Let's get ready." Imani's eyes opened, her focus sharpened, because even without looking, she knew someone was about to walk into that room, and for reasons she couldn't explain yet. Her chest tightened, not from the contraction building again, but from something else, something unfamiliar, something unexpected. The door handle moved, and in that moment, everything felt like it was about to shift. The door opened, not loudly, not dramatically, just a simple movement that should have meant nothing. But for Imani, it meant everything. A figure stepped into the room. White coat, confident stride, focused presence. At first, it didn't register, not fully, because her body pulled her attention back immediately. Another contraction hit, hard, sharp. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bed as her breathing tightened. "Stay with me," a nurse said near her. "I'm here," Imani responded, her voice strained but steady. The figure moved closer, speaking to the nurses, reviewing something quickly. Calm, professional. Imani's head tilted slightly, her vision narrowing as she tried to refocus between waves of pain. And then, she looked up. For a second, nothing connected. Her mind saw the face, but didn't place it. Then it did. Everything stopped. Not the room, not the movement, not the sound of monitors continuing their steady rhythm, but her. Her breath caught. Her grip loosened for just a fraction of a second. Because standing there, right in front of her, was Nathaniel. Not a thought, not a memory she had pushed aside. Not a version of him from years ago. Him, exactly as he was now, composed, sharpened by everything he had become. Imani blinked once, as if that would change what she was seeing. It didn't. Another contraction hit. But this time, it wasn't just physical, because everything inside her had just shifted. Of all the places, of all the nights, of all the people, it had to be him. Nathaniel's voice cut through the room, controlled and steady. All right, let's see where we are. He stepped closer. Close enough now. Close enough that there was no possibility of doubt. And then, he saw her. It didn't show immediately. Not in a way anyone else in the room would notice. But something changed. Subtle. Instant. His movements slowed by just a fraction. His eyes fixed on her. Recognition settling in. Imani. Her name left his mouth carefully. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Real. The room continued moving. Nurses adjusting equipment. Voices exchanging information. But between them, there was something else entirely. Imani swallowed, her chest rising unevenly, not just from the labor. So this is how tonight goes, she said, her voice low, edged with disbelief. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately, because this wasn't a situation he had prepared for. Another contraction hit. Imani leaned forward slightly, her hands tightening again. Focus, she said through clenched teeth. You're the doctor, right? That snapped him back. Yes, he replied quickly, stepping fully into position. I'm here, professional, controlled, exactly what the moment required. But his eyes kept returning to her, because this wasn't just another patient, and they both knew it. Nathaniel reached for her chart, scanning it quickly. Then again, slower this time. Something didn't align. His eyes moved back to her. Then to the chart again. A pause. Not hesitation. Recognition forming. Imani. He said again, quieter now. She already understood. She had known this possibility existed. Just not like this. Not here. Not with no space to prepare. Yes, she said. No explanation. No delay. Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. He stopped. Then tried again. You're pregnant. Even now. Even here. Imani managed a faint, strained look. Good observation. A nurse nearby glanced up briefly, confused by the tone she couldn't place. But Nathaniel didn't react, not outwardly, because his mind had already moved forward. How far along? He asked. Imani held his gaze. Didn't look away. Didn't soften it. Full term. That was all it took. Nathaniel did the math. Instantly, every detail lined up. Every possibility narrowed, until only one remained. His voice dropped. Quieter than before, but heavier. This is my child, isn't it? The question didn't echo in the room. It didn't stop the movement around them. But between them, it landed completely. Imani didn't break eye contact. Didn't hesitate. Didn't search for a different way to say it. Yes. The word was simple, clear, final. And just like that, everything changed. Not just the moment, not just the room, but the direction of both their lives. Because this wasn't just a delivery anymore. This was truth. And there was no stepping away from it now. The answer didn't leave room for interpretation. Yes. Nathaniel didn't move immediately. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because for a brief moment, everything he thought he understood about this night had been replaced with something else. Then instinct took over. Training, discipline, control. All right, he said, his voice steady again as he stepped fully into position. We're not stopping now. Imani let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Good," she said, gripping the bed again as another contraction hit. "Because I wasn't planning to." A nurse glanced between them briefly, sensing something she couldn't quite define, but there was no time to question it. "Focus here," Nathaniel said, his tone firm but measured. Imani looked at him. Really looked this time. Not as a memory, not as someone she used to know, but as the man standing in front of her now. And for a second, that reality almost felt more overwhelming than the pain. Another contraction hit, stronger. Her body tensed instantly. Her breathing tightened. "Stay with me," Nathaniel said, his voice cutting through everything else in the room. Imani exhaled sharply. "I am," she replied. But there was something different now, because this wasn't just a doctor guiding her through this moment. This was Nathaniel, and there was no way to separate that. "Of all the hospitals," she muttered under her breath, her grip tightening. "Of all the doctors." Nathaniel almost responded. Almost, but he stopped himself, because this wasn't the time. "Let's keep your breathing steady," he said instead. Imani gave him a look. "Even through everything." "You always do that," she said. "Do what?" "Avoid what's right in front of you." The words landed. Clear, direct. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately, because part of him knew. She wasn't just talking about this moment. Another contraction interrupted anything he might have said. "All right," he said quickly, shifting focus. "Listen to me." Imani leaned back slightly, her breathing uneven but controlled. "You're doing exactly what you need to do," he continued. "Stay with it." She held his gaze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded once. "Don't start acting like you've always been this supportive," she said, her tone sharp, but not cruel. A nurse nearby looked down quickly, pretending not to hear. Nathaniel exhaled through his nose, adjusting slightly. "I'm here now," he said. Imani let out a short breath. That's new. Despite everything, there was a flicker of something lighter in the room. Not comfort, not ease, but something close enough to break the tension for a second. Another contraction hit. Hard. Imani's body responded immediately. Her hands tightened. Her eyes shut briefly as she pushed through it. Nathaniel stepped closer without thinking. Instinct, not hesitation. "Right here," he said. "Stay focused." Imani opened her eyes again, her breathing sharp. "You don't get to just step back into this like nothing happened," she said, her voice lower now, more controlled. Nathaniel met her gaze. "I know." That answer caught her off guard, because she expected resistance, explanation, something to push against. But not that. Another wave hit before she could respond. "Okay," she exhaled sharply, gripping the bed again. "We can have that conversation later." Nathaniel nodded once. Agreed. For now, there was only one thing that mattered. The room moved around them again. More urgency, more coordination. "Everything is progressing," a nurse said quickly. Nathaniel didn't look away from Imani. "Good," he replied, because no matter what had just been said, no matter what hadn't been said yet, they were in this moment together, whether they were ready for it or not. Another contraction built, stronger than the last. Imani leaned forward slightly, her breathing tightening again. Nathaniel stayed right there, not distant, not detached, present, the way he hadn't been before. And even though neither of them said it, that difference was impossible to ignore. The room didn't slow down. It couldn't. There was too much happening, too much at stake. But between Imani and Nathaniel, everything sharpened. "This is my child, isn't it?" The question still sat there, not because it hadn't been answered, but because it hadn't been processed. "Yes." Imani's voice hadn't changed. Still steady, still direct. Nathaniel looked at her again. Not as a doctor this time, not as someone managing a situation, but as a man trying to understand something he should have known. "How long?" he asked. Another contraction hit before she could respond. Imani leaned forward, her breathing tightening again as she pushed through it. Nathaniel stayed focused, but his eyes didn't leave her. "Stay with it," he said. She nodded slightly, exhaling through the pressure. "It passed. Barely. Since after we ended things," she said, her voice controlled but lower now. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He didn't need more details than that, because it meant one thing. He had been living his life while this existed, and he didn't know. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. The question wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Imani leaned back slightly, catching her breath before answering. "Because I needed to make a decision without being influenced," she said. Nathaniel frowned slightly. "Influenced by what?" "By you," she replied. That landed clean. Another contraction started building. Imani felt it before it fully hit. Her hand tightened against the bed. Nathaniel noticed immediately. "Focus," he said, stepping slightly closer again. "We're not losing control now." "I'm not," she replied, her voice tightening as the pain rose again. She pushed through it, breathing steady, holding herself together. Then she continued. "You were already gone," she said. Nathaniel's expression shifted slightly. "Imani." "No," she cut in, not raising her voice, but making it clear she wasn't done. "You were there physically," she continued, "but everything else was already somewhere else." The words were sharp, but not exaggerated, just honest. "I wasn't going to bring this to you while you were still choosing everything else over me." Nathaniel didn't interrupt, because there was nothing to interrupt. Another contraction hit, harder. Imani's body tensed again, her breathing tightening as she leaned forward. Nathaniel stepped in immediately. "Right here," he said. "Stay with it." She gripped the bed harder this time, her eyes closing briefly as she pushed through the intensity. It passed slowly. When she opened her eyes again, she looked directly at him. "I didn't keep it from you to hurt you," she said. Nathaniel held her gaze. "I did it because I needed clarity," she continued. "And I wasn't going to get that from you back then." That hit deeper than anything else she had said. "Because it wasn't anger, it was certainty." "You decided on your own," Nathaniel said quietly. "Yes. And you were just going to—" He paused slightly, choosing his words carefully. "Handle this alone?" Imani didn't hesitate. "I already have been." That answer didn't come with emotion, which made it heavier. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, his hands steady, but his thoughts shifting faster now. "You should have told me," he said. Imani shook her head slightly. "No," she replied. "You should have been someone I felt safe telling." Silence, not empty, but full of everything that hadn't been handled when it should have been. Another contraction built, stronger, more demanding. Imani braced herself again, her breathing tightening, her focus narrowing. Nathaniel stepped closer without hesitation. "Stay with me," he said. This time, it didn't sound like instruction. It sounded like something else, something he hadn't said before. Imani looked at him briefly, and for a second, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not resolution, but recognition, because despite everything, he was here. And this moment, it didn't leave room for distance. "I'm not going anywhere," Nathaniel added, his voice quieter now. Imani held his gaze for a second longer. Then another contraction hit, cutting through everything else. "Good," she said through clenched teeth, "because you don't get to leave this one." There was no more space for conversation, no more room for anything that didn't serve the moment. Everything narrowed. "All right," Nathaniel said, his voice firm, grounded. "We're here now." Imani felt it before anyone else said it. Her body had shifted, changed rhythm, pressure, deep, demanding. Her grip tightened against the bed as her breathing became heavier, more controlled, more intentional. "This is it," she said under her breath. Nathaniel nodded once. "It is." The room responded instantly. More movement, more precision. "Get ready," one of the nurses said. Imani leaned forward slightly, her entire body focused on one thing now. Not the past, not the conversation, just this. Another contraction rose, stronger than anything before it. Her body reacted immediately. Her shoulders tensed, her jaw tightened, her breathing shifted into something deeper. "Push," Nathaniel said. Imani didn't hesitate. Everything in her responded, every ounce of strength, every bit of control she had been holding on to. This wasn't just physical. This was everything she had carried, every decision, every moment of standing on her own, all of it, leading here. She pushed. The effort showed in every part of her, her hands gripping tighter, her breathing sharper, her focus unbreakable. "Good," Nathaniel said. "Stay right there." Another contraction hit before she could recover. Again, he instructed. Imani shook her head once, breath catching. "Give me a second." "You've got it," Nathaniel said, steady but firm. "Stay with it." She looked at him. Just for a moment, and something about the way he stood there, present, focused, unwavering, it grounded her. "All right," she said, her voice tight but determined. The next wave came. Stronger, faster. She didn't wait this time. She pushed. Everything else disappeared. No room for doubt. No space for hesitation. Only effort. Only purpose. "Right there," Nathaniel said, adjusting slightly. "You're doing exactly what you need to do." Imani didn't respond. She couldn't. All her energy was here. Another push. Her body responded fully now. No resistance. No holding back. "Almost there," Nathaniel said. The room held its rhythm. Focused. Precise. And then, one final push. Everything came together in that moment. Effort. Pain. Strength. And then, a sound. Sharp. Clear. Alive. A baby's cry filled the room. Everything stopped. Not the movement. Not the work still happening around them. But something deeper. The intensity broke. Imani's body relaxed back against the bed, her breathing uneven, her strength finally releasing. Nathaniel held the child carefully, his hands steady, but something in his expression shifted. This wasn't routine. This wasn't just another moment in a long line of procedures. This was his child real. He looked down for a second, then back at Imani. There were no words ready, because none of them would have been enough. Imani's eyes found them. The child, then him. Her expression softened, not dramatically, not suddenly, just enough to show what this moment meant. "What is it?" she asked quietly, her voice still catching between breaths. Nathaniel glanced down again briefly, then back up. "A girl," he said. The word carried something more than information. Imani let out a slow breath, her hand lifting slightly, as if reaching before she even realized it. Nathaniel stepped closer, carefully, deliberately, and placed the baby into her arms. For a moment, nothing else existed. Imani looked down, her expression changing in a way that couldn't be forced. Relief, connection, something deeper than both. "Hey," she whispered softly. Nathaniel stood there, watching, not as a doctor, not as someone managing a situation, but as a man seeing something he hadn't been present for from the beginning. Now right in front of him, complete. The room continued its work around them, quietly, respectfully, but between them, there was a shift, not resolved, not defined, but undeniable. Because no matter what had happened before, no matter what hadn't been fixed yet, this moment changed everything. And neither of them could ignore that anymore. The room felt different after everything settled, not quieter. Hospitals never really get quiet, but slower. The urgency had passed. The movement had reduced. What remained was everything that came after. Imani sat back against the bed, the baby resting gently in her arms. Her body was still recovering, still catching up to everything it had just gone through. But her focus wasn't on that. It was on the small life she held. She studied every detail. The tiny movements, the soft breathing, the way something so new could feel so real so quickly. "Hey," she whispered again, softer this time. Across the room, Nathaniel stood near the window, not distant, not detached, just giving space. For once, he wasn't trying to lead, wasn't trying to control the moment. He was observing it, taking it in. His eyes shifted between Imani and the baby, his expression unreadable, but not empty. Full, just, contained. "You can come closer," Imani said without looking up. Nathaniel hesitated for a second, not unsure, just careful. Then he stepped forward, each step measured, not rushed. He stopped beside the bed, his eyes lowering slightly. "That still feels unreal," he admitted quietly. Imani glanced up briefly. "What part?" she asked. "All of it." She almost smiled. "Yeah," she said softly. "I get that." Nathaniel looked at the baby again, then back at Imani. "You handled this on your own," he said. It wasn't a question. Imani adjusted slightly, her arms holding steady. "I did what I had to do," she replied. Nathaniel nodded once. "I should have been here," he said. Imani didn't respond immediately, not because she didn't hear him, but because she wasn't going to respond out of habit. She looked down again at the baby before speaking. "You weren't," she said. Simple, clear. Nathaniel accepted that. Didn't argue. Didn't try to shift it. Because there was nothing to correct. "I know," he said. That answer stayed between them. Not heavy, but honest. The baby moved slightly, a soft sound escaping that immediately shifted both of their attention. Imani adjusted instinctively. Nathaniel leaned in slightly without thinking. "What do I do?" he asked quietly. Imani glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "You're asking me? I don't want to mess anything up." That caught her off guard. Not the question, but the way he asked it. "Careful." "You won't," she said. "Just support her head." Nathaniel followed the instructions slowly, his hands steady but deliberate. "Like this?" he asked. Imani watched him for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, that's fine." There was a brief moment where neither of them spoke, not because they didn't have anything to say, but because the moment didn't need it. Nathaniel looked down again. "This is—" he started, then stopped. Imani glanced at him. "What?" she asked. He shook his head slightly. "I don't even have the right word for it yet." Imani exhaled softly. "You don't need one," she said. That answer settled something. Not everything, but enough. Nathaniel stepped back slightly, giving her space again. "Are you okay?" he asked after a moment. Imani leaned her head back slightly, her eyes closing for just a second. "I will be," she said, not pretending, not dismissing, just honest. Nathaniel nodded once. "I'm not leaving tonight," he said. Imani opened her eyes again, looking at him. "That's not necessary," she replied. "I know," he said. "I'm still not leaving." There was no pressure in his voice, no expectation tied to it, just a decision. Imani held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once. "All right," she said. That was it. No agreement beyond that. No deeper conversation forced into the moment. Just two people, standing in something new, not what they had before, not what they lost, but something that required them to figure it out. From here, together, even if they hadn't fully said that yet. The next few days didn't come with clear instructions. No one handed them a guide on how to move forward. No one explained how to shift from what they used to be into whatever this was becoming. They figured it out in real time. Morning came earlier than expected, not because of alarms, but because of the baby. Imani shifted slightly in the hospital bed, her movements slower now, more careful. The baby stirred, a soft sound pulling her fully awake. "I've got her." Nathaniel's voice came from beside her before she even sat up. Imani blinked once, adjusting her focus. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, already reaching carefully. "I want to." She watched him for a moment, not questioning, just observing. Nathaniel moved slowly, supporting the baby exactly the way Imani had shown him the night before. More confident now, less hesitant. "Like this?" he asked again, quieter this time. Imani nodded. "You're learning," she said. Nathaniel glanced at her briefly. "I don't plan on getting this wrong." That answer stayed with her, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Focused, intentional, not like before. The baby shifted again, and Nathaniel adjusted instinctively this time. Imani noticed. "You're less nervous," she pointed out. "I still am," he admitted. "I'm just not letting it show as much." Imani almost smiled. "That sounds familiar." Nathaniel looked at her. "What does?" "Acting like you have everything under control," she said. There was no edge in it, no accusation, just observation. Nathaniel nodded slightly. "I guess some habits don't disappear overnight." "Some shouldn't," Imani replied. "Others should." That was as far as she took it. And for once, Nathaniel didn't push further. Later that day, the room felt lighter, not because everything was resolved, but because something had shifted. They were no longer reacting, they were adjusting. Nathaniel sat across from Imani, watching as she carefully adjusted the baby's blanket. "You've done this before," he said. Imani glanced up. "No," she replied. I just paid attention. To what? To everything, she said. Every appointment, every change, every moment I had to figure out on my own. Nathaniel leaned back slightly, taking that in. You really went through all of it alone, he said. Imani didn't respond immediately, not because she was avoiding it, but because she wasn't interested in repeating what had already been made clear. Yes, she said simply. Nathaniel nodded once. I don't expect you to just accept me being here now, he said. Imani looked at him. Good, she replied. No hesitation, no softening. Because I'm not going to pretend like that makes everything okay. Nathaniel held her gaze. I wouldn't ask you to. That answer mattered, because it didn't try to fix anything. It just acknowledged reality. Later that evening, things didn't go as smoothly. The baby cried longer than expected. Restless, unsettled. Imani tried first. Adjusting, soothing, speaking softly. Nothing worked. Nathaniel stood nearby, watching for a moment before stepping forward. Let me try, he said. Imani hesitated for a second, then nodded. All right. Nathaniel took the baby carefully, his movements steady but focused. Okay, he said quietly. We're not doing this all night. Imani raised an eyebrow slightly. That's your strategy? I'm working on it, he replied. He adjusted his hold slightly, shifting his position the way he had seen Imani do earlier. The baby's cries softened, then slowed. Imani watched closely. You got lucky, she said. Nathaniel glanced at her. I'll take it. A small silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just new, because this wasn't how they used to interact. This wasn't built on routine or expectation. This was being built from scratch. Later, as the room settled again, Nathaniel leaned back in his chair slightly. I was wrong, he said. Imani looked at him, not surprised, but not rushing to respond either. About what? She asked. About what mattered most, he said. That answer didn't come quickly, which made it real. Imani studied him for a second. You knew what mattered, she said. You just chose something else. Nathaniel nodded slowly. That's fair. No defense. No explanation. Just acceptance. Imani adjusted slightly, her posture more relaxed now than it had been before. You don't get to fix everything at once, she said. I know, Nathaniel replied. And this? She gestured slightly between them. This isn't about going back. Nathaniel shook his head. I don't want to go back. Imani held his gaze. Good, she said. Because that didn't work. A small pause. Then Nathaniel spoke again. I want to build something that does. Imani didn't answer right away. Because that wasn't something you responded to with words. That was something you watched, something you measured over time. The baby stirred again. Imani reached over, adjusting gently. Nathaniel watched. No rush, no pressure, just presence. And for the first time, that was enough. A few days later, the hospital no longer felt like a place of urgency. It felt temporary, like something they were about to leave behind. Imani stood near the window, the baby resting quietly in her arms. Her movements were more natural now, more confident, less cautious. Nathaniel watched from a short distance, not interrupting, not stepping in too quickly. He had learned that part already. Ready? He asked. Imani glanced at him briefly. As I'll ever be, she replied. There was no dramatic wait to the moment, no long pause before stepping forward, just movement. They left the room together, not side by side out of habit, not out of comfort, but because the moment required it. Outside, the air felt different, fresher, open. Imani adjusted her hold slightly as they walked, her attention split between the baby and the world around her. Nathaniel stayed close enough to help if needed, but not close enough to take over. You don't have to walk like you're on standby, Imani said without looking at him. Nathaniel let out a small breath. I'm making sure you're good. I am, she replied. You can relax a little. He nodded, but didn't completely step back. Some things weren't habits. They were decisions. They reached the car. Imani paused for a second before opening the door. Not uncertain, just aware. Because this wasn't just about leaving the hospital. This was stepping into everything that came after. Nathaniel noticed. You all right? He asked. Imani nodded once. Yeah, she said, Just thinking. About what? She looked down briefly, then back up. How different this is from what I expected. Nathaniel leaned slightly against the car, his attention fully on her. Is that a bad thing? He asked. Imani thought about it. Not long. But honestly, no, she said. Then added, it's just not what I planned. Nathaniel nodded. I don't think either of us planned any of this. Imani gave a small, knowing look. That's obvious. A brief pause. Then Nathaniel spoke again. I'm not trying to step back into your life like before, he said. Imani watched him closely. Good, she replied, because that version doesn't exist anymore. I know, he said. There was no hesitation in his voice. I don't want what we had, he continued. Not the way it was. Imani's expression didn't soften, but it didn't close off either. Then what do you want? She asked. Nathaniel took a second, not searching for the right answer, but making sure it was a real one. A chance to do this right, he said. Imani held his gaze. This? She asked. Nathaniel nodded slightly. All of it, he said. Being present, being consistent, not assuming I can fix anything overnight. Imani shifted slightly, adjusting the baby in her arms. That's going to take time, she said. I know. And I'm not promising anything, she added. I'm not asking for that, Nathaniel replied. That mattered because it removed pressure, removed expectation, left only one thing. Choice. Imani opened the car door slowly, placing the baby inside with careful attention. Nathaniel watched, stepping in only when she needed a second hand. No words, just coordination. Once everything was settled, Imani closed the door gently. She turned back toward Nathaniel. For a moment, they just stood there, not as who they used to be, but as who they were now. Changed, not completely figured out, but moving forward. I meant what I said earlier, Nathaniel added. Imani raised an eyebrow slightly. About what? Not leaving, he said. She studied him. You don't get credit for staying now, she replied. I'm not looking for credit, he said. I'm just making sure you know. Imani nodded once. Then show it, she said. Not harsh, not dismissive, just clear. Nathaniel accepted that, because that was the only way forward. Imani moved toward the driver's side, then paused again. Not for long, just enough to say one more thing. This isn't a second chance at what we had, she said. Nathaniel nodded. I understand. She held his gaze. It's something new, she continued. Or it's nothing. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. Then we build something new. That answer stayed between them. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but real. Imani got into the car. Nathaniel stepped back slightly, not walking away, not leaving, just giving space. As the engine started, there was no dramatic conclusion, no perfect resolution, just a beginning. And sometimes, that's where the real story starts. If you believe in second chances, like this video, and tell me in the comments, would you give love another chance after everything they've been through? And if this story stayed with you, subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what really matters.